Hi, today we're talking about the greenhouse effect. Now, the greenhouse effect is the most important topic of the year, not just for your test, but it's really important because it is going to affect the entire planet, okay? It is a humongous environmental problem that we've barely even started to address as a world, as a planet, and it should be our priority, and it's already costing the world billions of dollars due to hurricanes and all kinds of disasters. The sea levels are going to rise. We're going to have all kinds of problems just because we are not investing money to solve this now. So I hope you'll find it interesting, but you really should know this. Everybody should know this. Okay, so now that I've tried to push why it's important, let's get started. Okay. So before we start, I want you to think about what would happen if you had a planet that did not have an atmosphere, okay? This planet has a sun, and the sun is shining its light down on this planet, okay? And you know from Sec 3 that this light spectrum, it has all the light. It has infrared, then the visible light, red, orange, yellow, so on, all the way to violet, and then ultraviolet light, right? It has the whole spectrum. The interesting part of this is the ultraviolet for us. The ultraviolet is the part that heats up the planet. It's the part that gives you sunburns, okay? Now, we're gonna look at the ultraviolet light. It would hit the surface of the planet. It would warm it up, but once it hits the surface of the planet would radiate this energy as infrared energy, okay? That planet would actually be quite cold because it's not keeping that heat. Now we're going to look at our planet. Our planet has an atmosphere, okay? In real life, I'm going to exaggerate this. In real life, the atmosphere is really thin, okay? Now, first of all, some of that UV light, okay, would hit this surface. I'm going to draw this in purple going in. Would hit this, and some of it would hit clouds and the atmosphere and reflect. And that's a natural thing off the atmosphere. Some of it would go through to the surface of the Earth. And just like before, some of it is lost as infrared energy to outer space, and that heat is lost. But because we have the atmosphere, in our atmosphere we have certain chemicals that we call greenhouse gases. We call them greenhouse gases because they're very good at trapping that infrared radiation and keeping it in. So they keep it and they stop some of it from leaving. What are those gases? Well, the most important ones are these: carbon dioxide, CH4, which is methane, water, which is evaporated water, water vapor, and nitrous oxide. Those are the four key ones that you should know. There are others, but they're not as big a problem. And even out of these, water we can't really control. That evaporates from our oceans and so on, so that's just there. The really key ones that we can really try and do something about are carbon dioxide and methane. But in any case, these four are very good at keeping those infrared rays from leaving, and they trap it and they keep our planet warmer. If we did not have those gases, our planet would be much colder and much less comfortable. So it's actually a good thing that we have the greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect has existed before we started to drive cars, and it's a good thing. Okay? Now, the problem is that right now we are producing far too much carbon dioxide. We're doing that from fossil fuels. All our cars and our coal plants that produce electricity, they're burning a lot of fossil fuels which we are mining out of the ground and producing carbon dioxide. And methane. We are actually producing a lot of methane. The fact that we eat beef, well, cows, unfortunately, when they eat the grass, they fart a lot. They actually produce a large amount of methane, and methane is way more powerful than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. So if you have the same amount, methane, depending on where you read, it's between 20 times stronger than CO2 or up to 80 times stronger than CO2, depending on how you look at it, for how much time and so on. But this comes a lot from livestock, cows. This comes from burning our fossil fuels and burning forests and such, okay? Now the problem is, greenhouse effect is a good thing. But greenhouse effect is not the same thing as global warming. Global warming is caused by the greenhouse effect on steroids. It is caused by us producing so much of this that the greenhouse effect is happening way more than it ever did. And it's causing the Earth to trap too much heat, and our Earth is getting warmer and warmer and warmer. And it's going beyond what we really want it to do. So the Earth is actually warming up. This is a real problem, a very big problem, okay? So what are the consequences of global warming? Well, I've listed them off here, okay? Severe weather. You've probably heard that hurricanes are happening more than ever before. We're having a lot of severe weather. Weather pattern changes. The patterns of the weather are changing. And unfortunately, even our best scientists cannot predict what is going to happen 50 years from now. The patterns are changing, but we don't know. Certain areas are getting hotter, certain areas are getting colder, and we'll talk about that a bit more. The rise in the sea level. Well, it turns out that Antarctica has kilometers thickness of ice on that land, and that is melting. Greenland is another huge area of land that has phenomenal amounts of ice, and that was frozen as ice, kept as ice, and it has been there for thousands of years, and now it is melting. And there is enough ice there to raise the sea level by many, many, many meters, enough to sink a lot of cities underwater. It's already started to happen. It's just a few centimeters, but every year, more and more of that ice is melting. We're seeing in certain areas, we're seeing more droughts, where it doesn't rain for long periods of time. In certain areas, ironically, we're seeing floods. So since the patterns are changing, some places all of a sudden they're not getting any water. And other places that didn't get that much water all of a sudden are getting torrential rains and floods. And the last one here is the permafrost is thawing. As the global temperatures get warmer, the areas that were cold during the winter and summer and had permafrost, they're warming up and that ice is melting. And unfortunately, as we saw with the permafrost unit, when permafrost melts, all that soil starts to become active and starts to decompose things and release methane, which is a very strong greenhouse gas. So we have a bad cycle here where the planet's warming, it's melting the permafrost, which is producing more gas, which will make the Earth warm even more, which will melt the permafrost even more. So we're in a bit of trouble here as a planet. Something I want to talk about is I want to link all this to something we call climate change. People out on the street use the words greenhouse effect, global warming, and climate change as the same thing. They are not. The greenhouse effect is a natural, good thing for us. It keeps the planet warmer than it would be if we didn't have an atmosphere. Global warming is what happens when we produce too many greenhouse gases and the greenhouse effect becomes too powerful. And global warming ends up producing climate change, which produces severe weather, it produces weather pattern changes, it produces more droughts, it produces more floods. Okay? So, to recap, the greenhouse effect is light from the sun hitting the Earth. Some of it reflects before it even gets to the Earth, a little bit. When it hits the Earth, that becomes infrared radiation. Some of it is lost to space, but these greenhouse gases, CO2, methane, water, and nitrous oxide, can keep some of that infrared radiation. The greenhouse effect is a good thing unless we put too much of this stuff out, which is caused by cars and burning fossil fuels and livestock. Then if we have this, then we have global warming. Global warming causes climate change and all these effects. Okay? One last thing to mention is that there are natural sources of these greenhouse gases, such as volcanic eruptions and stuff like that. But scientists have made it very clear that the changes we're seeing are mostly produced by us humans. Anyway, I hope we can address this, and I hope it makes sense to you. I'll see you soon.